What is going on, guys? We are back playing some more Surviving with Mechanism version 10, and today we are going to be setting up the Induction Matrix, which is a multi-block structure that's going to allow us to store an immense amount of power. Now, if you've played through Mekanism to any degree, chances are you know that there are single block power storage options that come in the form of energy cubes. Now, there are a couple different tiers that will carry you through most of the early game if you're looking to have a little bit of a powered buffer. Chances are if you're working with something like the solar generators or stuff along those lines, you'll end up setting up a power buffer so that when it becomes nighttime out, your machines can still function. But eventually, even if you go to the highest tier, they are not going to be sufficient for storing the amount of power that you need or the amount of power that your late game options are producing. And we've now hit that point now that we have the industrial turbine producing a ton of power for us. So our only option, at least the only reasonable option other than making a ton of energy cubes, which would look super weird, is to make the induction matrix. Now, the reason the induction matrix is so great is because it is a very scalable option. Chances are you're really only ever going to need one of these. You can make it all the way up to an 18 by 18 by 18 multi-block, but you can start off very small and just tack onto it as you need more power capabilities. The great thing is you can also adjust both the internal storage capabilities of it and the ability to input various amounts of power and output it at different rates. And so thankfully, when we're setting this multi-block up, it's very simple. There's only 4 different blocks that you're going to have to work with, and 2 of those you're really not even going to need to vary the quantities in, except based on the size of what you're setting up. So what I mean by that is we are going to be using the induction casing, which of course is going to vary in quantity based on the size of the induction matrix you're going to set up. This is going to be used for all of the edges of the setup, and then it's going to be used to fill in majority of the faces of the setup. Anything that is not induction casing in the faces is going to be an induction port. Now, you do need 2 induction ports at a minimum for your system to actually function. You need one for input and you need one for output. You don't actually need 2 of them to construct it. The multi-block will form even if you have no induction ports on it, but of course, you're going to need at least 2 so you can input and pull out power. Chances are you're going to eventually want more than that, but if you are making the capabilities for input and output, always remember that that quantity applies to all the inputs and all the outputs. It's not per input and output basis. So let's say hypothetically you're able to input 10 kilojoules per tick, and that's a completely random number. It's very low. But if you had 2 induction ports that were input, each one would only be able to accept 5. It does not let you accept 10 at each. That's the reasoning that you're probably going to want to increase the capabilities of that and not just the internal storage capabilities of your induction matrix. Now, the other 2 blocks are what are going to allow us to alter those things. The first one being the basic induction cell. This is the lowest tier of induction cells you start out with, and these are what are going to impact the amount of power your induction matrix can actually store. As you go up in tiers, you're going to increase the capacity even more, and so you can see the starting one is 8 gigajoules. So this is way higher than you would have been working with before. And you also have the basic induction provider, which is the lowest tier of induction provider. And this is the block that you are going to add into your induction matrix to increase the input and output rates of your multi-block setup. So you can see here that the output rate is going to be 256 kilojoules. Now, you have to keep in mind that whatever input and output rate you have, you need to make sure that your cables are able to input that much power. You're not going to need to have an excessive input rate if your cables aren't even able to transport that much power over to your induction matrix. So just a couple things to keep in mind when you go about setting it up and, deciding how big you want it to be is going to be, are you able to even pull that much power over? How much power are you making? How many inputs are you going to have? How many outputs are you going to have? Things of that sort. Now, today we are going to be making a very minimal setup, but we are not going to be going with the lowest tier. We're actually going to go with the second tier of these blocks, which would be the advanced induction cell and advanced induction provider. Something also to keep in mind is that you do not need the tiers of these blocks to match. You can, mix and match them in your system in case you don't want to spend all the money to upgrade all of yours to the next tier if you already have a couple in your machine. But that's enough rambling about it. Let's get into the crafting. And it's going to be an interesting one today because these are actually not that hard to craft, but you do require one really annoying thing to craft them. And that should be very apparent right now. The energy tablet. When you make these, you need so many energy tablets, and these do not stack. So these are really cheap to make. They require gold and some alloy, but they're really not expensive, but they don't stack. And so you can see we have an additional chest here today to include some of the rest of the energy tablets we need. So it'll be interesting to craft this stuff today. We are going to start out by crafting the induction casing. We are going to be making the smallest possible induction matrix today, and that's going to be a 3x4x3 setup. And obviously, what I said earlier, the largest one you can have is 18x18x18. It does need to be a rectangular shape. It cannot be some obscure random shape where you still fit all the parts in. It does need to be rectangular. And so you can vary it between those two sizes, that being the smallest and largest, to any degree, as long as it is rectangular. So we're going to grab out energy tablets that correspond to this. I believe we're going to be crafting 36 of these. So we're going to want to grab out, we should grab out 9. And this one's going to be a little bit of a pain in the butt to craft. So we'll make the induction casing. I'm going to split these out in here so we can just fill in the energy tablets in here. And the reason we are making a couple extra of these, we're actually going to make 4 extra, is because we are going to be doing 2 induction ports. And so we're just going to have one for input, one for output, but we're actually going to be using, for a 4x3x4, we're going to use 32 induction casing for that actual block. And then we have the 4 additional for crafting the induction ports. Now the induction ports are going to require an elite control circuit, so we can go and craft those. You're going to use, for the induction casing, to get 2 induction ports, so we're good there. We also have, just so I make note of it, advanced universal cables right now, which is able to transport 128 kilojoules per tick, because we are pulling out of our industrial turbine because we want to make sure the power doesn't overflow there and stop our fission reactor from working and exploding in the end. And our basic universal cables was only able to transport 8 kilojoules per tick before, which is not even close to the amount of power we are generating. So we're going to make sure that our system today is able to both accept 128 kilojoules per tick and that we are actually transporting it over at that rate. So to make the basic induction cell, that's where you're going to be using a lot of the energy tablets, but this is also why last episode we set up the thermal evaporation plant, and we actually have a second one over here working right now that I set up off camera, and you can see we are pulling the liquid lithium that we are making in here out the side. We are using a rotary condensator to condense it into lithium, and then we have a chemical crystallizer over here turning the lithium into lithium dust. So if you're curious how you get that, you do need thermal evaporation plants. That is necessary to set up any tier of the induction matrix, because at the base level, these are both going to require 4 lithium dust per block. Now you can see that for these, they are both requiring basic energy cubes. And something to note is that if we look at the next tier, it requires 4 of the previous tier. Now you're actually only going to be getting a boost in power for the increase in resources expended for this. You can see here that these are 8 gigajoules. The next tier capacity is 64 gigajoules. So you are actually getting a noticeable increase and also decreasing the volume in your setup you are taking. So I know it's a little bit more of a pain to craft, but it is actually worth it to craft these higher tiers. Obviously it would be 8, 16, 24, 32. So we're actually getting a 2 times multiplier on the capacity that it allows for our system. And the same thing goes for the induction provider. You're going to use 4 of these, but you can see you are actually multiplying the final value that you get. Instead of having 4 of these, you're going to have only 1 block, and it's going to actually multiply the output rate that it's giving you by 2 times in the end. So it might seem like a little bit of a pain to have to craft all of this stuff, but I promise you it is worth it. And so that is why today we are going to be making 4 of each of these base tier ones and then upgrading them using the upgraded energy cube and a couple other things. So I think the first one that we should probably craft will be the easiest one. And so we're going to grab out a ton of these. We're going to make the energy cubes first, and then we're going to upgrade 4 of those. We can't hold all these in the inventory at once, so it is going to be a little bit interesting to craft. I am going to have to make some room for this too. But here we go. We'll make the energy cubes. So it's really a huge pain with these because, again, these are in the position where they do not stack. So there's a ton of stuff here today that is not going to stack, but there we go. So we have 4 of them to start. We're actually going to be making 10 of these, and I should probably, if we click A over here, we can get this up so we can keep crafting this really quickly. So that's 1, 2, I need to keep track of this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We got 8. And we need more energy tablets, as suspected. So we got 8 right now. We need 2 more, and then we are thankfully done crafting these. 9 and 10. So there we go. We have 10 of them, 4 for each of the base tiers to be upgraded, and then 1 for each of the upgrades, which will need to be upgraded to a second tier energy cube. So we can do that real quick, and doing that is going to require some of the things from this chest up here, and we'll progressively be able to grab out more of this stuff and hopefully get it out. But we are going to make the advanced energy cube, and I've actually never made energy cubes in this series, so this is the first time. There hasn't really been a need for a buffer system so far in any of our builds, but of course times change, and now we are at the point where we need that. So the next thing we can do is start crafting these. So we are going to need to grab out a bunch more of these energy tablets, and chances are I probably didn't count the amount of energy tablets we need correctly because it's looking like I'm short on these. So I do think we are probably going to have to hop off camera and get a couple more of these. Yeah, I did not even come remotely close to the amount of energy tablets we need for this, unfortunately. So I do think I'm going to have to go craft a significant amount more of these because I did not foresee. I thought I counted it out right, but now that I'm thinking about it, we are a little bit low. So we'll make the 4th one of these right here. And yeah, so now, oh, we actually did. It's counted out perfectly. I forgot the other ones require basic control circuits. Okay, so we're going to make the induction providers now. And wow, okay. Kudos to me. There we go. So we have the induction providers. We now have all 4 of those. And now we can do the upgrades. So the advanced induction cell is going to finish off our energy tablets. There we go. And the advanced induction provider is going to use the advanced control circuits along with the basic induction providers. And boom, we have now cleared out our inventory and we have everything we need for setting up the build today. And that was the hardest part, honestly, because the crafting of it takes a really long time, especially since most of the stuff in here does not stack because it's all able to accept power and has its own internal power storage, but the actual setting it up is really, really simple. So I mentioned last episode we are going to be setting it up over here, and we are going to go right here and start with our base. So as I mentioned, the edges being, you know, these right here doesn't include these 2 blocks, which are actually the face. If you guys were ever curious what that terminology is, the edges are this right here, and the face is going to be this. The edges have to be the induction casing. There's nothing else that you can do for them. The faces can be either the casing or the ports. So for us, we're going to put 1 port over here, 1 port over here, and then we are going to, I feel like this actually should probably be up against this wall back here. So we're going to do this and move it back 1 because I'm realizing now that it's going to get in our way. But we're going to put 1 port on this side, 1 port here. This will be the input, this will be the output, and then we're just going to fill in the edges and the faces everywhere else. So come back there. And here we go. So the only thing we're going to do right now is leave these spots on the front face open so that we can put in the induction cell and the induction provider. Doesn't matter how you put these in. We can slap one down there, the other down there, and now we're good. You do have the option of leaving the internal blocks as air, so do not feel like you need to fill up every block. If you have a setup and you are upgrading some of these and you don't want to get rid of the casing, you can just put in and leave air blocks inside the center. They are able to, the center can be induction cells, induction providers, or air, doesn't really matter. There's not a huge purpose until you start upgrading lower tier ones to higher tier ones and decrease the internal volume of it where you'd run into that, because otherwise you'd be using more casing. But it is an option if you don't want to fill up the entire inside with upgraded cells. So the minute we put down this last one, it should form. You can see that it is induction casing now, but it lists it as having 0 out of 64 gigajoules in it. And you can see this is the UI that comes up. You have the statistics here, and you have nothing currently stored in it, but it does have the capacity that matches the single induction cell we put in there. So what we're going to do now is come over here and disconnect this. And I will fully disconnect this system later, but we're just going to cover this up for the time being right here. And we are going to make sure that this is set to input. So we are going to right click on it, shift right click on it with our configurator, and red means it is set to output. So there we go. We got to right click on it again because it was actually already at input. So green is input, red is output, and we are just going to hook up our advanced universal cable and bring it right down here. And you can see now that we have power going in. The input is going to be at 384 kilojoules per tick. So it is not being limited because our advanced induction provider is able to allow for 2.04 megajoules. So there we go. And now we've input all the power from our setup over here. It is completely emptied out the internal buffer, which is significantly lower than our induction matrix can store. And now we are able to come over here, and this is the one that we need to shift right click to set to output. And what I'm going to do is, I guess we can just use for this one, because we don't really need a ton of power coming out for now, is we can just hook up the basic universal cables over here to our system so that this starts functioning again. And this also connects over to our machines over here that are making the lithium dust. And that means that if we wanted to and see some more power go in here and how quickly it will fill up, we can activate our fission reactor, which of course is very loud, so we are going to take some steps back. But you can see we are now spinning over here. We should be generating what we thought was going to be 71.4 kilojoules. But yeah, and it is not filling up the internal buffer at all because we are able to completely pull out the power. The input rate is exactly the power we're generating, and it is going up very quick. You can see that if we did not have such a large induction matrix here and we were using energy cubes, we would have already exceeded most of the energy cubes. If we wanted to take a look right now, the basic energy cube has 4 megajoules. The advanced has 16, so we are well over that. We're 10 times over that. The elite has 64, and the ultimate has 256. So in about 1 minute, we will have exceeded the ultimate energy cube in our induction matrix, and this system will have been running. Obviously there was already some in there, but collectively over the episodes, this system has probably run for less than 5 minutes. So a perfect example of why you would not want to continue using energy cubes into the later stages of Mekanism. And if we come back over here, even though it's very loud, we should be able to see that the temperature is being maintained because the coolant is able to pull out all the heat and it won't receive any damage because this setup is able to be a fully closed system. And now we don't need to worry about it blowing up because the industrial turbine won't stop functioning until this is full. And we've got at least a little bit of ways to go before that happens. So I think that's going to be it for today, guys. A couple things I wanted to touch on before the end of the episode, things that you may have already noticed, is my microphone hopefully sounds a little bit better. I did mention it to a couple people if you read the comments in the last episode, but I did upgrade finally my microphone. I used to have the Blue Yeti, and for a while that was fine, but I started being a little bit unhappy with how it sounded. You know, you were reaching certain points in, I don't even know what you'd call it, but certain levels where the audio was becoming a little bit distorted or it was capping out and it didn't really sound great. So I have upgraded to a Rode NT1 microphone, which is an XLR instead of a USB microphone. So hopefully it sounds a lot better. Still going to be fiddling with the settings to make sure that it's the appropriate levels and whatnot, and I'm sure it'll sound even better in the coming episodes, but let me know what you guys think about it in the comments. Hopefully it does sound better because it theoretically should, so unless my settings are really bad, but I'm still working on getting stuff sorted out, so I promise it will be even better in the future. Another thing I wanted to note is it's been asked a lot recently in the comments for me to make a Discord, just so that people can chat. I can get video recommendations, mod pack recommendations, stuff like that, to figure out what you guys want and not have to go through necessarily all the old video comments I might receive, which tends to be a little bit difficult to keep track of, and instead have a place where we can compile all those, do polls, stuff like that, And so there will be a link in the description of every video now. This will be the first one with it, where you can go to join the Discord. And I will do my best to, talk to you guys in there about, different things. If you have questions about the episodes, things you need help with, hopefully either myself or anyone else in the Discord will be able to give you the advice you need, things like that. Just a little community that people can help with modded Minecraft stuff and get inputs on future videos and whatnot. So yeah, if you guys feel like that would be interesting, feel free to go join it. And also let me know in the comments if you think that's a thing you'd be interested in. And if you have any suggestions for it. But other than that, guys, I think it's going to be it for today. Hopefully you enjoyed the episode. Hopefully you guys don't have too many questions on this one, because this is one of the easier multi-blocks we've set up in the last couple episodes. But if you do, as always, feel free to post it in the comments, and I will do my best to help you out. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the episode, and I will talk to you later.
Standing in a glass bowl at the end of a black hole, cold, lost and upside down.